Yay Networks.
If you've ever had that experience that right after you leave a doctor's visit, you have just this rush of so many questions that you forgot to ask. Either you didn't feel comfortable or your mind was swirling. You may have been feeling pressed for time. So if that is the case, this is the episode for you. In this episode and a series of episodes coming up, I will be sitting down with Dr. Robin Bone, OB-GYN with Ochsner Health, and she is sharing her insight, her wisdom on so many of those issues that we all have questions about. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition encompasses those statements that we may often share with our physician. Something just isn't quite right. I don't feel like myself. Think of that as the overarching umbrella for this week's episode. I am joined by Dr. Robin Bone. She is an OB-GYN with Ochsner Health. She and I, just on the side, have talked for a while about the questions that she gets on a regular basis, the confusion that she's hearing from her patients, the guidance that she's giving, the insight that she's giving to her patients. So much of it overlaps with the same guidance that we're providing nutritionally. There's just a lot of synergy there. So I thought it would be really interesting. We're going to do a series of podcasts with Dr. Bone, but I thought it'd be really interesting just to start with truly those that just all fall under that umbrella of something's just not quite right. What's going on with me? And then laying it out there. So Dr. Bone is incredibly hands-on with her patients. You're going to love her energy. You're going to love just how candid she is as she speaks, as she shares information with us. She's always been so tuned in to more than just simply the clinical side of working with patients. In her consults, she pays attention not just to that physical and medical need or needs of her patients, but also their spiritual, their emotional needs as well. She looks after the whole person, supporting a level of security and confidence on the inside and out. Dr. Robin Bone received her medical degree from Louisiana State University School of Medicine here in New Orleans, Louisiana. She did her residency at Charity Hospital here in New Orleans, where she received the Resident of the Year award. Dr. Bone specializes in maternity and pregnancy, also minimally invasive surgery, hormonal balance, and holistic health. As an OB-GYN, Dr. Bone says that she's able to experience truly the best of every specialty while caring for women. She has the honor of bringing life into the world, delivering babies, and she has the opportunity to engage with her patients on such a personal level. So with that, welcome, Dr. Bone. I'm so excited for us to talk about this. You're a wealth of knowledge. You have so much that you help patients all the time. You and I, anytime we start to talk, there's just so much excitement that comes from it. So I'm really happy that we can share with our listeners so much of the insight and the knowledge that you have.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So share with us a bit about your background, your experience, kind of what's led to us here.
So I've been an OB-GYN for the past 17 years. I've been in practice taking care of patients anywhere from the teenage years all the way to menopause and beyond. Since I myself am now 51 and have gone through or am going through the change of life, I've really focused on my own health and my own nutrition the last 4 to 5 years and how that impacts my hormones.
And one of the things that, I guess our overarching for today is when people come in and say, I just don't feel like myself, or something just isn't quite right. We get this from the nutrition side all the time as dietitians, and you get it probably 10 times more because people are coming into you. They want guidance on food, nutrition, hormones, vitamin levels, all types of things. But you even said like you see a huge difference even in how people are recovering from just like daily things. Like if someone is going out after a night of partying in their 20s versus their 40s, you're seeing a tremendous difference.
Oh, for sure. We see in the 20s, and we can all relate to this. When you're in your 20s, you go out at night, you party a little bit too hard, you eat bad food, you wake up. You may not feel so good for a couple of hours, but you bounce back and recuperate so easily. And then why is it when you do that same thing in your 40s, you can't stay out till 2 a.m. and if you do, it takes you days to recuperate. Days. So, and I think that relates to the fact that our bodies are not as efficient in our 40s at clearing out toxins and all the alcohol and the bad foods and the inflammatory foods that we ate in the 20s. And so it's just catching up with us because our cells are just not as efficient.
And that's something that we see as an extreme, like acute example is if someone overdrinks and consumes these things, we're seeing and feeling it in a way that's like, you can't escape it. But I would imagine that those same issues are happening on a much smaller level daily when we're making poor choices. Absolutely.
Absolutely. How I sort of got on this journey was I was in my mid to late 40s and I was having some lower back pain. Wasn't horrible, but I couldn't lift up my left foot to put on my scrub boots when I would go into deliveries without feeling the pinch in my lower back. Of course, went to the doctor. Everything's fine. Thought maybe it was weak muscles, but I just knew something else was off. I was also feeling arthritis in my fingers.
And how old were you?
At 47, 48. Arthritis in my hands. My thumbs were hurting after surgery. And so that in combination of also just feeling tired, after a full night's sleep, I was just waking up, just feeling exhausted. But that still didn't really tip me over the edge as far as trying to clean up my eating habits and really just kind of taking back control of my health. It was actually the weight gain. So,
vanity gets us every time.
It did. It really did. So 5 pounds, I was tolerable, but when the scales started going up to closer to 10 pounds and my clothes started not fitting me, then I was like, all right, Robin, you have just got to start diving into what exactly is going on. So I went to an integrative health conference for women. And it was really eye-opening about anti-inflammatory and inflammation that's kind of chronically going on in our bodies from basically our lifestyle choices.
And this is something that, the big picture that we'll be talking about sort of comes back to every issue that we're going to be talking about today. And this is what you deal with your patients a lot. This is what we deal with our clients a lot. We're going to continue, y'all are going to hear us continue to come back to inflammation and what can we do nutritionally that's going to help to blunt or buffer the effects of inflammation in our body, about anti-inflammatory diets. But then also we'll be talking about supplements, vitamins and things. What are some of the things, just big picture, that you recommend across the board? Like if someone's like, if you don't, someone listening, and of course we're not able to hear everybody's story, but we have things nutritionally and supplement wise that I'm like, I look at them as almost insurance. What are some of the things that you recommend like that?
Yeah. Before I go into that, can I just, patients are so confused about exactly what even inflammation is.
Right.
So I just kind of want to clarify that, it's easy to relate to inflammation when, you get a splinter in your finger or a mosquito bite or you break a bone. Our bodies are designed to attack inflammation. And so you get that tissue swelling and all those inflammatory cells that rush to try to help heal, get that splinter out, make a whelp at a mosquito bite or have swelling around a broken bone. And that's really more acute inflammation, and acute meaning like immediate. But when you said chronic inflammation, it started making me think like a lot of us have lived with chronic inflammation, and the source of that can be foods that we eat or the environment that we're in or pollutants in the air, alcohol, too much alcohol, smoking, just a lot of the things, eating fast food all the time. Right. So all of that can lead to chronic inflammation, and it creates an inflammatory response that you really don't even realize is happening. And we could deal with that in our 20s. But now over time, it's taking its toll. And that on top of perimenopause and menopause, where our hormones, estrogen is actually anti-inflammatory. And as we're getting older and our levels are decreasing, that is one of the reasons why our bodies just can't fight off this inflammation as readily. Plus our cells are getting older and they're working a little bit harder. So chronic inflammation is sneaky because it just creeps up on you and you don't even realize that it's happening till one day you wake up and you're like, what the heck is wrong with me?
I can't put my shoes on without pain in my back.
Yes, exactly. So, after I went to that course, which was back in 2019, around in that time, I just started preaching anti-inflammatory to my patients as they come in. And, to really start thinking about eating healthier. But there's three things that typically our diet is lacking. So when patients come in and are like, Doc, what supplements should I take? I'm preaching vitamin D. Long before COVID, I was saying vitamin D, omega-3s. Most of us don't get enough omega-3s in our diet. We're just not eating enough. And if you can get it through your diet, all the better. But I know I don't eat enough fish and I'm not eating enough flaxseed and chia seed and all the other things that I should be eating. So I take an omega-3 and then magnesium. I encourage all of my patients, Google, when you're laying in bed at night tonight, Google benefits of magnesium. You will just see so much information about magnesium. And I'm pretty particular about what kind of magnesium. So the two I recommend are magnesium glycinate, which is pretty easy to find, and magnesium threonate, which is a little bit harder to find.
And those are two of the three that I always look at, D and omega-3s. Magnesium, usually, if someone is an athlete or has muscle cramping or any of these things, but I personally take it also, and I agree with adding that into it. And then I look at a multi as just sort of insurance for someone, especially if they have a limited diet. Maybe they're doing specifically low carb, or they're vegan, or they avoid dairy, whatever it is, especially if there's some sort of a limitation in there. Why not?
Why not? It's not going to hurt.
So with that, talk to us about the patient that's coming in, and because, while you see hundreds, if not thousands of patients, there's, I would imagine, some of the same themes that are coming up. And those are some of the ones we're going to address today.
So, I actually had a patient, it's funny, yesterday that came in, and I'm just going to call her Ann. She's 49 years old. She had come to see me a few years ago with, Doc, I'm tired, I'm emotional, I'm snapping at my husband, I'm fussing at my teenagers, and I just feel off. And she came to have her hormones checked, and her periods were regular. And so of course we check her hormones and we check other labs in her thyroid, everything's normal. And this was about 3 or 4 years ago. And, I even was that doc that was like, everything looks fine, and so off she went. And then she went to her primary care doctor, who she had the same complaints. I feel tired. I, feel off. And so they check her out and everything, is fine. So she came back to me this year with very similar complaints. I'm tired, I'm fatigued. It's gotten worse over this past year. And now my periods are heavier, Doc. I'm flooding, and, it's out of control, and I'm not sleeping well. And I went to my primary care doctor, and the only thing out of this whole panel of labs that she brought in that was off was her iron was a little bit low. And so her primary care said, you need to go back to your gynecologist because you got to fix that bleeding problem because your iron level's low. So we had her all scheduled for an endometrial ablation, which is an outpatient procedure that we do to help lighten periods, her cycles, after we had a long discussion about all her options. And then, we talked about health and nutrition, at that visit, and we talked about anti-inflammatory, and we talked about vitamin supplements, and we just kind of went off on a tangent because of her fatigue and feeling tired and not sleeping well. And so fast forward to yesterday, where she comes back in the office after about 3 months since her last visit, and she cleaned up her eating. She was eating anti-inflammatory, really mostly lean proteins with lots of fruits and vegetables. She cut out sugar. She came back in. She said, I'm sleeping better. I feel better than I have in years. She lost 5 or 6 pounds. And lo and behold, the last 2 cycles were normal, and she wanted to cancel her surgery.
Isn't that amazing?
I mean, it's just the impact of, what you can do for yourself to try to change your overall health. It's so important.
So with that, some of the key things that people come in, and also y'all, as we're talking, like Dr. Bone has just so much that we're going to, cover. And we're planning to do a series of different podcasts. And so one will focus specifically on menopause, so if there's other topics that you don't hear us talk about today and you're like, hey, I would love to know, or there's some that we touch on, but maybe not quite as in depth as you'd like, reach out to me, let me know, because we'll be doing more and we can kind of go deeper into certain topics. Let's take a minute to talk about Smile Brilliant, a sponsor for this week's episode. So one of the things that we know about stress is that it manifests itself in just so many ways. And one way that many people experience is grinding their teeth or clenching their jaw. We also know that not only does this damage our tooth enamel, it can crack our teeth, lead to migraines, and fixing or preventing these issues, it can be really expensive. So the cost of custom night guards from Smile Brilliant is low. It's as low as $45 per guard. Reorders are $25 per guard. A digital file of your dental impression is kept on file to make reorders hassle-free. So visit smilebrilliant.com. Use promo code FUELED for 20% off. Check out their night guards, and you can also check out the other products at Smile Brilliant, from custom fitted teeth whitening trays, whitening gels, and more. That's smilebrilliant.com with 20% off using promo code FUELED. We chose today really 5 of the key areas that people come in feeling issues on, and this would be men and women, but of course most, the data and what she'll be sharing with y'all will be about women, but these are things that are complaints people coming in all the time, not necessarily just menopausal women, but women in general. So sleep is the first.
Mm-hmm. Sleep is so important. I tell you, if you don't get enough sleep, that is where your body repairs itself. That's where it eliminates all of these toxins and all the things that are in environment. It processes that in the middle of the night. And if you're not getting enough sleep, your immune system cannot do the hidden work that it does overnight. And 40 to 60% of our population, so let's just say 50% of us have sleep disturbances, and are just not sleeping well. I mean, that's half of us that are out there.
The other thing we've talked about sleep on this podcast before is when we're sleep deficient, we tend to overeat and we tend to eat more carbs and refined carbs. So exactly what we're talking about not to do in terms of inflammation, those are exactly the types of foods we tend to crave more when we are deficient in sleep. And also when we look at comparing even apples to apples, if someone is chronically sleep deficient, and even if they are able to keep calories in check and get that exercise in, they still are losing less body fat than their counterpart who has equal sleep. Mm-hmm. So there's so many reasons we say, it comes back to vanity for a lot of people. They may say, well, if, I understand cellular repair while I'm sleeping, but if that's not enough for you, pounds.
So, your cortisol, right? It's your stress hormone. So when you're not sleeping, you're chronically stressed because your body can't heal itself, and more cortisol leads to more insulin leads to more body fat deposition, more visceral fat, more belly fat. And that's what gets us girls bothered,
Right. So what are some of the key strategies?
So, I think I try to keep things simple. The goal is to sleep 7 or 8 hours, right? That's our goal. Wear lightweight clothes, sleep in a dark room. My mom sleeps with the TV on, and I fuss all the time because it's just not good to sleep with noise or light. Mm-hmm. You want to sleep in a dark room for the best, your best, deepest sleep. And I like to think of it as a 3-2-1 rule. So 3 hours before bedtime, no eating, try try not to eat that big full meal, at least 3 hours ahead of time. 2 hours before bed, no phone, no computer. Really watch that blue light, right? We know that these computers and the phone can affect a part of our brain called the pineal gland. The pineal gland makes something natural called melatonin, and melatonin is like a hot topic that's out there, right? You'll read about melatonin, but our bodies make that. But in light and in computers and phones, it decreases the production. So therefore, the melatonin's there for a reason. It helps us go to sleep at night. And when we're on our phones right before we go to bed, we're not producing that our own natural melatonin. And then the 1 hour rule is do something that is going to be relaxing. Whether it's a Epsom salt bath, whether you're doing some sort of meditation, maybe you're just reading or journaling or something like that kind of gets you into routine. So 3, 2, 1, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour.
I like that. In the 3 hours before bedtime, really flows in nicely with not having our glucose levels, our insulin levels up through the night as we're sleeping, which is not good for inflammation as well there. I like to have a little snack before bed. It's just a psychological thing. So I'll specifically reach for something that is lower carb, so that, and just protein base. And so they're ideally no snack before bed. But for me, it is truly just a pure psychological. And so what I found works for me is there's these little cookies called High Key, and they're really low carb. And I did a continuous glucose monitor experiment for a little while. And these actually literally did keep me kind of it was as if they had no effect on blood sugar or insulin levels. And so just like they're like the size of a nickel. And so maybe just a couple of those is something, or even like some people would like just a piece of cheese or string cheese or something like that.
Walnuts, almonds.
Exactly. Casein is a type of a protein that is a slow release, slow digesting protein. And so even taking casein and an unsweetened almond milk, you could do chocolate version if you were craving chocolate, something. So there are options, I would say, but trying to keep it specifically low carb, or if you do have that willpower. My husband is not a snacker, and he's like, we just ate. I'm like, it has nothing to do with the fact that we just ate. But ideally, the 3 hours before bed, nothing. Or if you are going to choose something, be really conscious about what that is. During that continuous glucose monitor experiment, I found that even having the smallest bit of something that had maybe 10 or 15 grams of carbs, my glucose levels were in the caution level for like the next 6 hours during my sleep, which meant glucose levels up, which meant basically contributing to more inflammation in the body. So for me, that was really eye-opening. And so just for the listeners, okay, ideally nothing in that 3 hours before bed. The 2 hours, this is one that I recommend. It's really hard to put your phone down. And so I sleep with it in the other room. And so it's not far. I can still hear it. I can still use it as the alarm, but that is a game changer. If you can put your phone physically away from you, it's a game changer for sleep. And then toning down kind of your stress levels, or like you said, toning down that vagus nerve before bed, the Epsom salt, taking that magnesium at night, because the magnesium supplement that Dr. Bone recommended earlier also helps with muscle relaxation. So if you incorporated that as part of that nighttime ritual, maybe with that tea, and then the Epsom salts is essentially magnesium salts.
Yep.
And so you're saturating your body with magnesium to help relax. So finding whatever that ritual is before bed. And you may say, well, I'm not one to meditate, or I don't know. There's a bunch of apps that can help with that, but also an old-fashioned book, can help. Even if you find it really interesting, if you're tired, you might only get 3 pages in, and that's helping you wind down. So whatever that ritual is, those are going to be some key essentials. And I really like the 3, 2, 1. So 3 hours is the food, 2 hours is the screen time, and 1 is that relaxation.
Mm-hmm. And talking about magnesium, we were talking about magnesium glycinate and 3-and-8. Glycinate is nice because it really helps to relax muscles. And I do recommend to take that about 30 minutes before bedtime. And there's been numerous studies that regardless of the cause of the sleep sleep problem. There's been 3 different studies that have shown that after 8 weeks of magnesium supplementation, it increased sleep time in all the studies, and it increased restful sleep in patients. So I just am a firm believer in taking magnesium at night.
And you have something that you call an M&M recipe, which is not M&Ms for the reason we just talked about of having the carbs before bed. Tell us your M&M recipe.
So M&M, this is, someone comes in and they're wanting something like Ambien for sleep, or doc, what can I take for sleep? I'll say take the magnesium, but the other M is melatonin. And ideally you want to do the 3-2-1 so that your body makes its own melatonin. But melatonin, and certainly you can start with that. It comes in 1, 3, and 5 milligrams. I usually tell patients start with 3. Some people are sensitive and have to back down to 1. Some people need to go higher than 3 milligrams. So I think that is also another good thing that you could take about 30 minutes before sleep. So
as you talk about the 3-2-1, and the 1 being starting to do things that are going to kind of help you wind down, and we're talking about tea, and then we also talk about taking magnesium, and then if you felt like melatonin was going to be, something that might be something that you want to try, taking those with your tea, and then being specific, maybe that tea is specifically passion flower, which helps to help us unwind as a stress reliever, or chamomile. So being very strategic in like what we're doing. And not only are there compounds in passion flower or chamomile, also magnesium, melatonin that help us sleep, if that also is becoming part of that routine, that is cueing your body that it's time to wind down.
Think about kids, right? That they want to go in their room. They want a dark place. They want mom to read a book at night. There is a routine. You take your bath, you read a book, you go to bed. We're wired the same way.
Right.
Take our bath, read a book, go to bed.
Let's take a minute to talk about Bonafide, sponsor for this week's episode. Bonafide is for women dealing with perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms who want safe and effective non-drug solutions they can trust. Silvessa by Bonafide is the first comprehensive system designed to restore and protect hair and skin affected by estrogen decline from the inside and out. Silvessa delivers 3-way support for hair and skin. It includes a daily capsule, hair serum, and skin serum that work together to support healthier looking hair and skin. Give Bonafide a try today. No hormones, no prescription required. Our listeners receive a special offer up to 54% off when you subscribe to any product by going to hellobonafide.com using promo code FUELED. That's hello, BONAFIDE.com. Promo code FUELED to claim your special offer of up to 54% off subscribing to multiple products, including Silvessa. For best prices and free shipping, go to hellobonafide.com. Use promo code FUELED. So which one do we want to talk about next? Do we want to talk about mood next, or do we want to talk about weight gain?
Oh, loaded question. Let's talk. Well, I think mood is a lot related, is sort of intertwined in a lot of this. So maybe let's hit weight gain,
okay,
and then we'll come back to mood.
Okay. So what are the key, we're going to just acknowledge right off, we're going to talk about this for a handful of minutes. Obviously, Dr. Bones spends a lengthy amount of time with patients talking about factors that are going to be very individual. Our dietitians at Ochsner Fitness Center, that first consult is an hour and a half really diving through. So what you're about to hear is not going to be for you individually, but just big picture. What are some of the biggest things that are contributing to that?
I think the frustration for the patient in her 40s that's coming in is she comes in and she's like, Doc, I have not changed anything. I'm eating the same. I'm exercising. I'm going to the gym. I'm doing the same things I've always done. And the scale just keeps going up. And why does that happen is because in perimenopause, our hormones, even though lab values are normal and you're still having periods, your hormones can be off. And when you're making less estrogen, as we kind of talked about earlier, estrogen is anti-inflammatory. So the lower levels of estrogen that you have, the more inflamed our bodies are, and the more cortisol that gets produced. And that just, as we've talked about, creates its own set of cascade where you have higher insulin levels, more insulin resistance, increase in visceral fat. And honestly, that is just a feedback loop. It just spirals from there.
And you see it, you can almost see it in clients and patients, and it seems so clear from the outside, but to that patient, it doesn't when they're right in the middle of that spiral.
Yeah. And visceral fat is, we all have subcutaneous fat. That's the fat that kind of lives underneath our skin. But visceral fat is that fat on the inside that lines our organs. That's that belly fat that we're talking about. And that is the unhealthy fat. It is a metabolic fat for sure that is creating more inflammation and more harm. So, how do you combat this? Is really focus on doing the things that you can do by improving your diet, eating anti-inflammatory. That is the number one thing. It decreases your insulin levels. And I know you've preached on this for years and years, is decreasing your insulin levels really breaks that cascade and improves insulin resistance and decreases visceral fat. So things that you can do on a daily basis is eat anti-inflammatory. And what is that? Right? So, I know you've talked about this for years. That is eating lean protein, more fish, avocado, good fats, avocados, olive oils, lots of fruits and vegetables, green leafy vegetables, and really trying to stay away from processed foods, starches, rice and pastas and breads and all the things, just in moderation.
And probiotic rich foods as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, there's pickles, lots of fermented foods.
We were out of town. We were actually, recently in a part of Italy that's really up north and that has much more of even a German influence on the culture. And they had really delicious sauerkraut. Mm-hmm. And, both my husband and I said, usually we're not big sauerkraut fans, but we asked for extra of this. I mean, we've loved it. And Brad said, "What is sauerkraut?" I was like, "It's fermented cabbage." And he was like to me, fermented cabbage was just that. And he was like, "That sounds horrible."
Fermented just sounds like It's been sitting there for years, right?
Right. But it's actually a really good thing as far as our body is concerned, And so something that is truly the fermented foods like miso or sauerkraut, but also yogurt, kefir. Kefir is a very probiotic rich. It's like a drinkable, very thick yogurt almost. So kombucha would be another. So looking to see how are you getting the probiotics in, and everything that you heard Dr. Bones say, it's the lean proteins, it's those plant-based fats, the fruits, the vegetables, and then limiting the starchy foods. And I think that's the hardest thing for people is it's so easy to focus on what am I trying to cut out. And then it feels very, it feels like a deprivation versus thinking of all the things that we can add in.
Mm-hmm. So I am a really simple person and I really try to keep it simple and things that patients can remember.
Right.
I think it's back from med school, mnemonics, right? To try to remember things. So I just think of the 7 rules, right? You want to have 70 ounces of water in a day. You want to try to eat a lot of protein. So 70 grams of protein in a day. And 7 servings of fruits and vegetables in a day. So, if you can do that, you're not going to be hungry. You're not going to want the starchy foods because you're not going to be starving. So 7 servings of fruits and vegetables is a lot.
And each of those 7 or 70s is focusing on what you're putting in, not what you're taking out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when we're talking about weight and, combating weight gain, the first thing that you're going to is let's target that inflammation. And so that anti-inflammatory diet. And then what are some of the other things that you're guiding someone through on weight? We talked about sleep and the influence of sleep on weight.
Exercise, stress, things that you can do. Stress increases your cortisol. Exercise lowers your cortisol.
Right.
So doing those things and try to creating small habits. It's hard to do all these things all at once, but if you just really focus on just sort of being mindful, how am I going to increase exercise in my week? Maybe it's just walking 20 minutes, 3 days a week, then trying to increase it from there. Really focus on stress reduction, whether it's yoga or meditation, or just getting together with girlfriends and laughing, right? Laughter helps.
Or getting together with girlfriends and that's your walk and talk. You know, I'm a big, there's like, you know, some people use the phrase like habit stacking. And what are things that you're going to do anyway? And what can you pair together
to make it more fun?
Right. Exactly. Our dietitians at the fitness center, Lauren and Alexis, often at lunch, they kind of take a movement break together and they do a walk and talk. If it's nice, they may go outside, but if it's really hot, we have the track upstairs and they're doing that walk and talk and just catching up from the day, but doing it over while they're also moving, you know? And so whatever it is that is going to, you know, exercise can look very different for people. And so it's finding, what do you enjoy? What are you going to be consistent with? How can you fit it in? And is there something else that you're doing that you can kind of layer that in with?
And don't even think of it like exercise. Just think of it like movement. Just go and do something to move your body. Right.
And not putting pressure that it's got to be a 45-minute fill in the blank. It could even just be 10 minutes of that movement. Stress and reducing stress. What are some of the things that you look at there?
Well, I think reducing stress will be different for everybody. You know, for some people love yoga. Some people love to meditate. I will be honest with you. I have tried meditation and it is not my thing. I just cannot relax. My brain does not go into a good place. You know, I feel like it's a complete waste of time. My brain just keeps spinning. So that is not my thing. But to take the dogs walking on the levee or just watching a beautiful sunset or just sitting outside in nature, that's my thing. And that reduces my stress level. And honestly, just taking some deep breathing. If I just stop what I'm doing and take 3 big deep breaths in and out, I just feel the stress leaving my body. So, you know, it's going to look different. You're going to have to find what works for you. And that's going to be different for every single person.
There's a breathing technique that we've talked about on this podcast before called 4-7-8. And someone asked, why is it that? I'm like, well, because Dr. Weil and everybody else who I hear talk about it, that's what it is. But it's take a breath in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 7, and then exhale for a count of 8. Part of the reason I think the numbers are there is it makes you focus on the number. And that also is helping to clear the other clutter from our heads. And I'll use that before I give a presentation. If I'm nervous, at night, usually I fall asleep really quickly, but sometimes not, or sometimes stuff starts going through your head. And I'll do that 4-7-8 breathing in for a count of 4, hold it for 7, then out for a count of 8, because that for me helps to just also remind me to take those deep breaths, you know? And even if you forgot the numbers, make up your own, you know, as long as you're not holding it too long. Anything else that are some of your top things that when someone is coming in, what about, and I meant to ask this too, when we talk about sleep, what about the influence of progesterone on sleep?
Yeah. So we see this so much in these perimenopausal years. So progesterone, part of the reason that we're having sleep disturbances is that, I'm going to talk a little technical, you know, a little medical now. So back when we were ovulating, ladies, we were making eggs and those eggs were making estrogen. Once you ovulate and that egg pops out, getting ready to be fertilized, then what's left over makes progesterone in the latter part of your cycle. So that's a pretty normal menstrual cycle. What's happening in the mid-40s and beyond is we're still having periods, but many of those cycles we're not ovulating. So we're still making estrogen because those follicles that are trying to make an egg is making estrogen, but progesterone is not being produced at the end. And progesterone, we know, is linked to GABA. And as you have less GABA, which is, you can kind of Google that, but basically it's a neurotransmitter that is linked to sleep. And so as you don't have as much GABA, you're going to have more trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. And progesterone is a really powerful relaxation hormone. It's what we make, is made when we're pregnant. We have a lot of progesterone kind of circulating around. It's there on purpose. So progesterone, when you don't have it, you may be a little more irritable. Your mind may race more, especially at night when you're trying to sleep. And sometimes just supplementing with progesterone fixes a lot of the perimenopausal and menopausal sleep disturbances. So don't dismiss your doctor when she may suggest taking some progesterone. It can be very helpful.
And so that as an aid for sleep, for lack of a better word there. And then as we talk about weight and we look at the really crucial role that sleep plays in weight, that's naturally going to help there. We said that mood or irritability, those really kind of span everything that we're talking about. And that also being kind of the relaxation promoting that you said of progesterone. So all of it, that's one key element that if it is lacking and your physician is suggesting this, like you said, be open to that. Okay. And then hormonally, are there other things that someone that you're seeing often that maybe there's an imbalance or someone's deficient in that is contributing towards weight gain?
Well, obviously, you just want to check the thyroid, have labs checked just to make sure that there's not something else that could be contributing to that. So, and most patients have had that checked or by their primary care doctor or even their OB-GYN, because it's one of the things that we do check for.
Do you have an opinion if you're prescribing thyroid medication, which ones you do?
I do have an opinion, but that's contrary to what a lot of endocrinologists say. So, I think Armour thyroid or NP thyroid, I've just seen better results. Yeah. Patients feel better on that than Synthroid. That's contrary to what we were taught back in medical school. But
it's what we see with clients makes a difference in how they feel and their weight. So when someone is taking Synthroid, I'll encourage, why don't we ask about Armour thyroid? Can you give a quick explanation of the difference of Synthroid and Armour thyroid?
Synthroid is basically just T4, whereas Armour and NP thyroid is a combination of T4 and T3. And just to kind of give you a little breakdown about the difference between the two, T3 is metabolically active thyroid hormone. T4, our bodies convert T4 into T3. There's varying thoughts, and you're going to ask different doctors and they're going to give you different opinions. But there are some doctors that believe that some people have an enzyme deficiency. It takes an enzyme to convert this T4 to T3, and some people just don't convert it very well. So you could give all the T4 in the world, but they're still not really their bodies are not doing a very good job of converting to T3. This is a really controversial topic that a lot of experts will, are naysayers on this. And like I said, you can ask 5 different doctors and you're going to get 5 different opinions.
Very passionate opinions.
Very much so. But what I would suggest is if you're on T4 and you're doing just fine, then great. Right. You're that person that's converting to T3 very well.
And so what she also means is if you're on Synthroid and you're doing just fine,
don't change.
Roll with it. Yeah.
Roll with it. But if you're on Synthroid and you're still feeling sluggish and you're still feeling it's not working, then talk to your doctor and see if they'd be willing to try an alternative like Armour or NP thyroid.
Okay, so we've talked about 2 of the big ones, sleep and also weight, that there are common that we see. And we talked about the different things we can do to help improve sleep. And then with weight, some of the behavioral changes, the habits, when it comes to nutrition, movement, and then also the thyroid conversation to explore if needed. And then the third really big one is mood. And this could be, it's sort of like mood is really umbrella. It could be, irritability, anxiety, depression, but all of this kind of falls under that. Something's just quite not right, not quite right. So what are the things that you explore when someone comes in with just kind of any of those in that cluster?
Yeah. So getting back to that perimenopausal woman, as her estrogen levels are declining, sometimes our serotonin levels are decreasing too. And so that is all part of perimenopause. And that patient may go to her primary care doctor and say, I'm feeling agitated, I'm short-tempered, I feel off, I feel depressed, I feel anxious. I can't describe it, but all of a sudden I'm having heart palpitations and I'm just not feeling well, or I'm laying down at night and I feel such anxiety. Some of that certainly can be anxiety. A lot of times the primary care doctor will give them Lexapro or Prozac or something along those lines to control those symptoms, but to also consider that it could be hormonal, and sometimes taking that progesterone at night can help alleviate some of those symptoms. So I think to be open to, what works for you. For some people, it might be an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medicine, but sometimes it can be hormones. Sometimes it can just be some of the things that we've already talked about, like you're tired, right. You're sleep deprived. When you eat better, you sleep better, and when you feel better. So a lot of those things may be cleaned up a little bit right. and altered just by getting better sleep and eating better. But sometimes it is a little bit more. I mean, it really is real. You're right. feeling that, and so it could be perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms, but it could also be some anxiety and depression. And heck, we have been so stressed the last right. 2 to 3 years with COVID, right? I mean, all of us are walking around a little bit more anxious and a little bit more fearful. And I think also just kind of taking charge and recognizing that what is creating the anxiety? Is it what's going on the news? And maybe we shouldn't, I myself are watching much less news and right. TV than I used to, just because
limiting our airtime.
Yeah. It made me more anxious thinking about it. Is everything okay at home? Mm-hmm. Really stopping and addressing, are the relationships that you have with people, in a good place? And also, is your job creating anxiety? What are things that you can do to improve that, that stress level?
And the things we talked about that help with sleep, as we talk about that 3-2-1 with sleep, 2 hours before limiting screen time. Well, that's like kind of can pull double duty. Number one, if we're putting our phones away, we're putting our smart devices away, we're not having that light that's affecting our sleep. We're also not doing the doomsday scrolling through social, or we're not watching like the latest headlines or reading the latest horrors that's like in whatever news outlet we're checking. And then also when we're talking about those relationships with family, well, we're talking to family mm-hmm. because our faces aren't in our devices. And so all of the things that you look at of what nourishes us really deeply inside are largely not going to be on those smart devices. So when we can put them away and actually, either read a book that is very pleasant or have these interactions with our family, that maybe those are kind of secondary to the smart devices. So those things that we're talking about that help with sleep are also, if you're reading this right before bed, of course you're going to feel a level of anxiousness or depression, depending on what you're reading on your phones. So all of these things do really play a role. And I was like, smiled as you said it, but when you look at progesterone helping with that, every woman listening is going to be like, I want to talk to my doctor about progesterone right now, because my sleep, my weight, and my anxiety, that might be, it's not to say that that's a cure-all, but it is one that if this is something that someone has lower levels, it sounds like it's certainly something to address. Mm-hmm. And as you said, be open to it. So overarching, we've talked sleep, we've talked weight gain, mood, irritability. There's so much more that we'll talk about. Like we said, we'll do an entire separate episode on menopausal, where we'll also be talking about the non-hormonal treatments for hot flashes, night sweats. And as I said to our listeners too, if there's things that you're like, okay, I want to know more about these specific things that you just touched on briefly, or if there's other topics that we didn't cover that you would want to know if you were going to Dr. Bone as a patient, let me know. And just to wrap it up, what would you say to someone listening of, whether it's some of these specific issues we talked about or others that you often hear from patients? How do you recommend that the steps to start to take back that control?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You have control over your own self, and, making up your mind and flipping that switch and being like, you know what, I'm going to make these changes. Eating better, it's all in your power, right? Sleeping better, that maybe get better with time, doing the tips that we've talked about, and actually eating better, you'll sleep better, limiting alcohol, all of these things are in your control. And then going and talking to your doctor and having a real conversation, write the symptoms that you're having down so you don't get there and forget about the things that you want to talk about. And really sit down and have an honest conversation and say, this is what I'm feeling. And I know all my labs are normal, but what are your suggestions? And really keeping that conversation open, but you are in control of of the diet. You are in control of limiting alcohol. You are in control of moving your body. You are in control of meditating or doing something to relieve the stress in your life. And those are the things that you really need to start with and focus on.
And finding health practitioners who are willing to work with you. And if you have someone who you feel is not open or listening, or you maybe constantly feel rushed by, exploring and finding those providers who are supportive to you, you know? And so as you hear the conversations that Dr. Bone's having with her patients, those are, I think those are conversations that most patients would hope that they could have with their physicians, but maybe not everyone can. So exploring to find that practitioner that's right for you, taking advantage of the different disciplines that are out there. So if, you know, behavioral health, you know, working with a therapist may be beneficial, working with a registered dietitian to really hone in on what some of these broader suggestions we're talking about, what does that look like for you specifically? And we can link to those. We'll link to contact for Dr. Bone's office. We'll link to information, contact information for our registered dietitians that work with me specifically over at the fitness center, and just other resources that can help you in these different areas, you know, so that the more information that you have about sort of why things are going on, and the more that you can, whether it's different labs that someone like Dr. Bone may be doing specifically, or metabolism tests that our team of dietitians may do, or body composition, the more information that you have of what your baseline is, and that's given you essentially data and information on yourself, then you also know how to take which steps are the first steps that make the most sense for you to take personally.
Mm-hmm. This is a journey. You know, things are not going to be fixed tomorrow. But if you look ahead, you know, I always say if 5 years from now, you look back and you're like, I lived the best 5 years of my life, what would that look like? And I think it's just important to embrace that and start making these changes now, so that 5 years from now, you are better off than where you are today.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm excited for us to visit these other topics coming up soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
I always love every conversation I have with Dr. Bone. I love her energy. I love her insight. I love how down to earth she is, and just really matter of fact, and really simplifies and streamlines things for us. So as we talked about, I'll include several links for more resources for y'all in the show notes of this episode. And let me know what you think. As you incorporate some of these strategies into your own life, I want to hear about it. If there's other issues, other things that you would want to talk to Dr. Bone about if she was your physician, I also want to hear about that as well. We can layer those into future episodes. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.